Hi guys, Manarok here, and today we are talking about the top 10 Planeswalkers. Let's dive into the list. First, before we dive into the actual top 10, let's start with an honorable mention. Elspeth, Sun's Champion, is a very strong Planeswalker. She put together some very interesting results in Standard, and she's very powerful. She's played in various blue-white control in various formats like Pioneer, Modern, Legacy, so she is very good. And you can see why. Her +1 is very strong. She put 3 1/1 white soldiers onto the battlefield, so that's very good. I mean, she creates 3 body on the battlefield, which is not something to take lightly. And you can see why, because her -3 says destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater, which means that those 3 1/1 creatures are usually pretty good to hold back what's remaining on the battlefield. Having a Wrath on a stick, a conditional Wrath on a stick, it's very powerful too. So she's a very powerful Planeswalker. Her -7 gives you an emblem with creatures you control get +2/+2 and they have flying, which makes your small creatures very big and very powerful. So she's a great Planeswalker. She didn't make the cut to the top 10, but she's very good and she deserved this spot. Now let's start with the actual top 10. So number 10 we have Chandra, Torch of Defiance. Chandra is a very strong Planeswalker, and you can see why. She only costs 4 mana and has 2/+1s, and they either give you card advantage, damage to your opponent, or mana ramp. So this is kind of nice for a +1 on a 4 mana Planeswalker. Her -3 is a removal for most of the creatures in Modern and in Pioneer, so she's very good for that. Sure, 4 damage is not a lot, so maybe you can kill a Tarmogoyf, a big Tarmogoyf with that, or a Gurmagangler, but you can kill many other creatures, so that's very good. The -7 is basically you win the game, because whenever you cast a spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to target creature or player. It's very powerful, and once you get to that point, you basically win the game. And in fact, she is so strong that she has been dominant in her time in Standard in a mono-red deck that was very powerful, and she sees play in blue-red Phoenix and some aggro, red aggro decks in Pioneer, and she sees play in Modern, in Red Prison, and sometimes in Titan Shift, and some Red Prison decks play Chandra in Legacy too. So she is very powerful. Now let's talk about number 9, Gideon, Ally of Zendikar. He is very good and is played in Pioneer in a variety of decks. He is played in blue-white control in Modern, and in Miracles and Stoneblade in Legacy, and he is even played in some control, some Taxis deck and controls in Vintage. So he is very strong Planeswalker, and you can see why. His +1 makes him a good finisher in control decks, but it also makes him a good creature in beatdown decks. Also, the 0 makes him very strong, because you can put a 2/2 creature in play every single turn, which is not something that you should take lightly. Also, the -4 is it's kind of good. I mean, giving your creatures a +1/+1, it's good on its own. So it's a very good Planeswalker that is played in a variety of formats. Now let's see number 8, Narset, Parter of Veils. She's a very strong Planeswalker, so strong that she's played in every single format in the game, from Standard to Vintage. She's played in basically every control deck that has blue, and she's very strong, and she's played not really for R-2, which is kind of good because it's like an Azcanta activation. I mean, it's very good that, but that's not the reason she's played most of the time. That's a bonus, but the real reason she is played is her static ability, which makes her basically a Leovold, which is a very strong card, which is played in Legacy, and Leovold is in 3 colors, so that makes him less playable than Narset, and also Leovold is a creature, which makes him easier to kill. Narset is a Planeswalker, and it's harder to kill than a creature, usually. So, Narset is very strong. So strong that she has been restricted in Vintage, a format where drawing cards is very important. Now, let's talk about number 7, Ugin the Spirit Dragon. Ugin is very strong, as you'd expect from an 8 mana Planeswalker, but he is also very playable because you have Thronelands in Modern, you have Cloudpost in Legacy, so you can put this guy on the battlefield in a reasonable time. And in fact, he is strong, he's playable, so he's played in Throne in Modern, and Post and Rector combo decks in Legacy. So Ugin has a nice +2, which is basically a Bolt. His -6 is basically an Oblivion Stone, which is very strong. Also, notice that his -6 is a one-side Oblivion Stone. It's a one-side Oblivion Stone because the -6 says exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less, that's 1 or more colors. And you play Ugin in colorless decks. So, one-side Oblivion Stone. And by the way, this exile permanence doesn't destroy them, so you can also deal with indestructible permanence. And the -10, it's nice. It's not like game ending, but will swing the game in your favor because you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, put up to 7 permanents from your end to the battlefield. That kind of stuff is pretty powerful. Now, let's talk about number 6, of course, Ugin's friend, which is Karn Liberated. Karn Liberated costs 7 mana, 6 loyalty, which is a lot. It's very hard to kill because, he has a +4, which is very big. And this guy is played, of course, in Throne in Modern and in Post and Rector combo in Legacy. And his +4 is very interesting, but his -3 is the strongest ability because you can basically deal with any permanent on the battlefield. Every permanent except for the ones that have protection or X-proof. So it's very powerful. And the -3 says exile target permanent. It doesn't say non-land permanent. So you can even exile lands with that, which is very interesting. The -14 is a very interesting ultimate, and if you use that in the right way, it's game ending. So, nothing to say about that. Let's talk about number 5, of course, Teferi Time Raveler, the most hated Planeswalker ever, because basically he prevents your opponent from playing instants, you know, and that's very, very annoying. Of course, if you are playing that, you are kind of happy about that ability. And Teferi is a very strong 3-mana Planeswalker, which is very good starting point for loyalty that can go to 5 the turn it comes down, so that's interesting. Is +1 makes your sorceries become instants basically, and the -3 is a very interesting ability too, because you bounce a creature, an artifact or enchantment, and you draw a card, which is kind of good. And all 3 of these abilities are powerful, and that's why Teferi Time Raveler sees play in every format in blue-white control decks. Now let's see number 4, Wrenn and 6. Wrenn and 6 is a very powerful Planeswalker. You know, it just costs 2 mana, which is very, very little. And at first it doesn't seem so OP, doesn't seem so powerful, but when you analyze it well, you understand that it's a very, very strong Planeswalker, and that's why it has been banned in Legacy. You know, the +1 doesn't seem so strong. Return up to 1 target land card from your graveyard to your hand doesn't seem so strong. But then you realize that fetch lands are legal where this Planeswalker is legal, so basically in Modern, Legacy, Vintage, and having 1 single fetch land and Wrenn and 6 basically mean that you have access to your land drop for every single turn, and you basically can get mana screwed, because with the fetch you can fetch the right land that you need. So that's alone make Wrenn and 6 very, very, very powerful. But fetch lands are not the only synergy with Wrenn's +1. In fact, there's another very interesting one. Actually, this is even more powerful. Wasteland. There's this thing in Legacy called Wasteland that can destroy your opponent's non-basic lands. And if you couple that with Wrenn +1, you basically get rid of all of your opponent's non-basic lands. Yes, 1 per turn, but that's basically something that your opponent can stop. And that's very, very, very powerful. The main reason why Wrenn and 6 has been banned in Legacy. And you know, that's just the +1. Then you have the -1, okay, that's not very, very strong, it's actually just 1 damage to any target, but can help getting rid of something like Talia, Guardian of Traben, which is very, very annoying, and also can get rid of something problematic like Noble Hierarch. How do you say that? Hierarch. Or you can even get rid of 1 loyalty Planeswalkers, which is very interesting. And then you have the -7, which basically gives all of your instant and sorceries in your graveyard flashback, which is very, very, very strong. So that's why Wrenn and 6 is very powerful Planeswalker and was played in Delver in Legacy. Now it's banned, so no more Delver with Wrenn and 6. And of course it's played in Modern, in Jund and Traverse Shadow decks, and also is played in Vintage in Temur Walker. Now, let's talk about number 3, another powerful Planeswalker, which is Liliana of the Veil. Well, Liliana is a very powerful planeswalker, and seeing her on turn 3, if you are playing with her, it's very good. If your opponent is playing her on turn 3, that's very, very scary. You know, the +1 is an interesting ability because you can make your opponent discard. Of course, you will discard too, but sometimes you don't have cards in hand, and that's very good actually when you make the +1. And there's a problem with this +1. I mean, not a problem, a synergy, because you know this is played in Jund, which casually plays Vernon 6, and the +1 from Vernon 6 makes you take back 1 land from your graveyard, and guess what? You can discard that land when you use the Liliana's +1. So if you use Vernon +1 and Liliana +1, you basically are making your opponent discard a card. You don't discard nothing, which is very, very good. Then we have Liliana's -2, which is target player sacrifices a creature. And this is very strong because you know you can get rid of very annoying creatures, like for example True Name Nemesis, which is very hard to kill. With Liliana you can kill that. And then you have Liliana's -6, which is basically you win the game. I mean, it's not straight you win the game, but it's you will win the game, because you know you are playing Liliana in decks that you can catch when they -6 you. Before we move on, let me say that Liliana accomplishes everything we just said while also costing 3 mana. You can play her on turn 3, and that's very, very powerful. And because of everything we just said, Liliana is played in a variety of decks. Basically every control or mid-range deck that includes black in Modern, Vintage, Legacy, you see Liliana basically everywhere. Now let's talk about number 2, Jace the Mind Sculptor. You know, Jace has been referred to the most powerful planeswalker ever printed till recently, so this says something. So Jace is very, very powerful. 4 mana, has 4 abilities, and all of them are good. And you know the +2 is okay because you can control what your opponent is playing, is drawing. But the real power of Jace is 0 ability, because you know that's basically Brainstorm, which is the most played, or one of the most played cards in Legacy. So having the Brainstorm on a Seek is very, very, very powerful, especially in a format where you have fetch lands, because you know you draw 3 cards, put 2 cards that you don't want on your deck, and then you fetch and you shuffle your library. So your the 2 cards that you don't want are gone. So that's very, very powerful. Jace -1 is relevant, it's good in certain circumstances, and Jace -12 is basically you win the game. It's hard to get to 12 loyalties, but it's doable. Anyway, Jace is very, very, very powerful, and sees play in basically every mid-range or control decks that plays blue. So you will see him everywhere, and of course in Modern, Legacy and Vintage, because it's not legal in other formats. And Jace is so strong that he has been banned in Standard just after 1 year of release. This says something. So it's very, very powerful. And yes, here we go. Now we have number 1, which is currently the most broken Planeswalker. Is the strongest Planeswalker ever printed at this point, and it's of course the most hated one, together with Teferi, Time Raveler, and it's Oko, Thief of Crowns. You know, when Oko first was spoiled, many people were saying, oh, it's not good, it's a terrible Planeswalker, it's not that good, and it's a mythic slot wasted. So many people didn't realize how Oko would be OP, because he is OP. Yeah, because it doesn't seem like too powerful, you know. You have this +2 that create a food token, doesn't seem much, but then you realize that the food token can give you 3 life, and that's very relevant against aggro decks. The food token is also an artifact, and that's very good if you are playing in a deck that synergizes with the artifact, for example Urza's deck. And also, you know, that's a permanent that can be used for something else. Sorry, no pun intended. I mean something else, but something elk, because the food often becomes an elk, a 3/3 elk. Because, you know, there's this +1 ability that says target artifact or creature loses all abilities and become a green elk creature with base power and toughness 3/3. So your food can become creatures, and making a 3/3 every 2 turns is not that bad. And also the +1 can get rid of every troublesome creature that your opponent controls. So that's very, very powerful. Also, it can get rid of a very problematic artifact, like, for example, Chalice of the Void. So this is a pretty good clue of why Oko is so powerful. It can basically remove any creature or artifact and can give you life, can give you artifacts, can give you creatures. Is very powerful. And also is -5. It's relevant because sometimes you can exchange a worthless thing like food when you are in the right spot for something else, like a creature with which is very relevant. Think about stealing Dark Confidant with Oko, Thief of Crowns. That's very powerful because you now draw through 2 cards per turn. So that's very, very strong. The -5 is strong. And you know what else makes Oko very strong? The fact that he is a 3-mana Planeswalker. He has 4 loyalty as a starting point. He can go right away to 6 when you play, and he has a removal as a +1. So Oko's loyalty grows a lot. I mean, like a lot. It's very hard to kill if you don't have removal for Planeswalker. If you just has to damage Oko, you will waste a lot of damages to get rid of him. And trust me, he's very high loyalty Planeswalker. I remember once I was using D20 for Oko's loyalty ability, and it wasn't enough. I mean, I got this guy to 21, 22. It was just like cheating. And you completely realize how powerful Oko is when you read that 69% of the Mythic Championship 6 field registered Oko. So that's not something small, it's a lot. And he has been banned just 1 month and a half after release. That has to say something about Oko. The fastest banned Planeswalker in history of Magic, and also, you know, it's a staple in Pioneer, and Oko is also a staple in Modern. And guess what? He's also a staple in Legacy. And maybe with time, who knows, he will be also a staple in Vintage. About Legacy, you have to know that recently there was a Grand Prix in Bologna, and there were 7 copies of Oko in the finals. So this is something very relevant. And also, guess what? Oko also accomplishes something relevant in Vintage, where Oko plus What of Druids won the Vintage playoff, like, what was that? October. So it's clear that Oko is a very, very, very powerful Planeswalker. And that's why every deck that can play him will play him, simply because he is so strong and is for sure the strongest Planeswalker up to now. Okay, cool. We are at the end of this video, and thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please click the like button below, and if you want to stay updated with our new videos, subscribe to our channel. See you soon!